On today's episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod, we have so much to recap from this past week's D23, the full X-Men cast, and so much more from Disney. And all of these trailers, Avengers Doomsday with a special look, VisionQuest trailer looks awesome, Ahsoka Season 2, Percy Jackson Season 3, and Lanterns Episode 1. What an episode, what an ending. We have to talk about that and so much more on today's episode starting right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Welcome back to episode number 146. Now, today's episode is going to be very D23 focused, and I apologize because, again, just based on my recording schedule, unfortunately, the timing worked out such that I could only cover D23, which happened basically right after I closed the recording window for last week's episode, so unfortunately, I could not squeeze it in. So that's why this is a little bit late, but I still think that there are so many interesting things to discuss here as we look at the X-Men casting, as we look at all these different trailers that have come out, and so many other announcements. So this is going to be an in-depth analysis, and also Lanterns Season 1, Episode 1, or I guess Episode 1 as it's called right now, we don't know if there's going to be Season 2, was something. It was wow. There's a lot to talk about there as well. So anyways, we'll dive into all of that and so much more. But guys, if you could subscribe to the Access Blockbusters Pod YouTube channel, that would mean so much to me. Thank you so much for your support. And also subscribe to the main Access Blockbusters YouTube channel as well. If you're interested in the audio platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast, we are available there as well. That is it for the intro, guys. Let's get into today's topics. Alrighty, time to power up those Green Lantern rings. We are here to talk about the first episode of the new DCU television show entitled Lanterns, starring Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan and Aaron Pierre as John Stewart. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion for episode 1 of Lanterns. So if you have not seen the episode, don't worry, just make sure to save the segment, save the podcast, or save the video for later and come back once you have. Also, apologies if you are listening to this podcast or video segment, whatever the case might be, right before the next episode comes out. That's just due to the nature of when these videos and podcasts are edited and released, so I apologize for that, but hopefully this will be a nice little primer before the next episode. So, Lanterns, I've been saying for the longest time that even before Supergirl came out, and yes, I didn't love Supergirl, and even before all of the chaos in the DCU right now, and yes, let's be honest, things are not the most smooth at the current moment, but I have been looking forward to Lanterns for a long time. I have said that Lanterns has looked like the series with the most promise. It looks like, in a similar way to how WandaVision took the fantastical and made it conceptually interesting with the sitcoms and with the exploration of grief. It looked like Lanterns, at least from the trailers, was doing a similar thing with the extraterrestrial and the intergalactic and the space cops idea and Green Lanterns and rings, but grounding it in an earthbound mystery. That was James Gunn's original pitch. It is one of the few things from that original announcement that has seemingly come to fruition basically unimpeded, and now here we are. And a lot of people, by the way, have been not so thrilled, especially those of you who have loved the comic books, with the casting of Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan, which is understandable. Again, it's not the traditional Hal Jordan that we come to expect, the more Ryan Reynolds casting of Hal Jordan, if you will. He's older, obviously, he's a grizzled veteran, and he is not the, again, just traditional younger Hal Jordan. I personally have had no qualms with that as long as the story is what is most important, and this version of Hal Jordan is what is servicing the story. And after watching this first episode, look, it's only been one episode, so about 45 minutes of television. I love this casting. I love both Aaron Pierre and Kyle Chandler, much like how Wonder Man was very reliant and dependent in a good way on the chemistry between Trevor Slattery, played by Ben Kingsley, and Wonder Man, played by Yahya Abdul-Mateen. This show is, I think, going to be heavily reliant on the chemistry between Aaron Pierre and Kyle Chandler, and I think so far it's great. I think that the relationship that they have here is contentious, both in the fact that John Stewart thinks he's being trained as Hal Jordan's substitute and eventual replacement, but he doesn't know where that's coming, so he has to treat Hal Jordan with deference and respect, meanwhile also kind of eyeing the ring and wondering if Hal Jordan is kind of past his prime. And then Hal Jordan kind of sees John Stewart as a reminder that he is replaceable and that he will be replaced someday. And I just think that their banter works really well. I didn't expect this to happen. I like that Hal Jordan is somewhat of a celebrity in this universe. I guess that makes sense now because this is a world in the DCU with a bunch of metahumans running around, so I think it makes sense that he is sort of a celebrity. I like that scene at the taco stand where people are taking pictures with him and whatnot. And I think that their chemistry, it just works. It elevates the material and the script, and I think that it is going to be foundational moving forward. We'll get to that very last scene in 2026, because I got some questions and I got some theories, but we'll get to that at the very end of this segment. The other thing, though, about the pitch of this show is that it was going to be a true detective-style mystery, and I love that. I love the premise and execution thus far of this concept, because one of the ways that you can take an extra or interdimensional, intergalactic sort of concept, a cosmic sort of concept, but make it feel more real and tangible is by grounding it in a very specific town in Nebraska and just making it a murder. And yes, I know that there are going to be aliens involved, and we got, this is from the trailer, so apologies if you don't know this, but in the trailers they talk about manhunters being a part of whatever this conspiracy is, and I have a feeling that manhunters are going to be one of the keys to this final scene here in 2026 at the end of this show. But, we're going to get Manhunters, we're going to get Sinestro, we're going to get some intergalactic stuff. So that's all going to come. But for the time being, just having this be a very specific murder mystery case in a town in Nebraska is so interesting. Also, I think it's so fascinating how all these characters are interconnecting as well at the beginning. Like, you have the character that Jon Stewart gets intimate with, that grandma character, I guess, in the show, as part of the family. And then the police character, I forget her name, but the police character is working with Jon Stewart and working with Hal Jordan. And then she is married to that lawyer, and the lawyer's dad is apparently this shady, I don't know, government or bureau person, or I don't know who he is. And his wife, obviously his wife cheated on him with Jon Stewart. So there's all sorts of weird and wacky, crazy things that are happening in this small town already in this first episode that I find super interesting. And we'll see how that goes for this narrative. But I think that all sets up a lot of intrigue as well. I really like also the interrogation scene with Hal Jordan in that room where he's like, this guy's an alien. I know he's an alien. And I mean, honestly, this show, while it is serious, right? It's not Peacemaker levels of goofy and comedy, but it is still funny at the same time. It is serious in that it is trying to solve a mystery, but it reminds me a little bit of Stranger Things in the sense of, not in the sense obviously that there are kids and it takes place in the 1980s, but more of the sense that there is still a serious mystery going on and you're trying to unravel the pieces as you go along. But it's still pretty funny. I mean, Hal Jordan, honestly, is much funnier than I thought he was going to be. I laughed out loud a couple times as I was watching this episode. He is legitimately funny. I think the scene in the courtroom was pretty enjoyable to watch. So I'm enjoying Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan, and I hope you guys are as well. Excuse me. And even if you guys are those who expected a different Hal Jordan and were disappointed by the casting of Kyle Chandler, I hope you guys can give him a chance, because I think he's really great thus far. So I found all of that super interesting and compelling. Now let's get to the ending really quick before we jump out of this segment. So the beginning of the show takes place in 2006. There's a little bit of a prologue there with Jon Stewart. And then there's 2016, right, which is where Jon Stewart's being trained and whatnot, and you get the brunt of that interrogation scene. And then there's 2026, which surprised me, because I was like, 10 years later, is Jon Stewart still being trained? And they run up, they go to the same football field, and him and the police officer, and they go to the football field, and there is Kyle Chandler's Hal Jordan. He's sitting there. He looks like he's dead or injured. And from what I saw, it doesn't look like he has the ring on. So to me, this points to really only one possibility. I do not believe this is the real Green Lantern. That would be a crazy thing to reveal if that was actually Hal Jordan and he is dead from the very first episode, and you have to grapple with the fact that Hal Jordan's just dead the entire time. I just think that would be a crazy move. Rather, especially based on what the trailers were saying, Manhunters can shapeshift into anybody. And I have a feeling that this is some sort of alien that shapeshifted into Hal Jordan. And I think that is what we're looking at here. Now, where the real Hal Jordan is, if I'm correct, where the real Hal Jordan is in 2026, I don't know. Also, what happened between those 10 years of 2016 and 2026, I also don't know, because that's a long time. 10 years is a long time to go between episodes. So I don't know what happened there, but I am intrigued. I think that is one of the most important things that this episode could have done, is pique my interest, keep me engaged in the premise and the characters and the concept, and get me on board with what this show has to offer. And I had high expectations for Lanterns, and I think the first episode is delivering, and I am very excited to see the next episode next week. What did you guys think of Lanterns episode 1? Let me know in the comments down. Alrighty guys, it has happened. We all thought it was going to, and now we have an official, not full, because Kevin Feige confirmed on stage that this is not going to be the full cast of the MCU X-Men, but still part of, and I would say the majority of the MCU's X-Men cast. We have announcements, we have a release date, we have all of those things, and we're here to talk about it right now. So, Kevin Feige gets on stage for D23, and he says we have, well, first of all, he talks about Spider-Man Brand New Day. And once he starts talking about Spider-Man Brand New Day, which just came out, obviously, we know where he's going with this. And sure enough, he brings out Sadie Sink, who is like, hey, I just did Spider-Man Brand New Day, but anyone want to talk about the X-Men? And the X-Men are here. Well, first of all, Jake Schreier shows up on stage, and he confirms that the X-Men movie is coming out on May 5th, 2028. So let's talk about that really quickly. May 5th, 2028. So it looks like, as of the time of this recording, that X-Men will kick off the MCU's next saga, the Mutant Saga, presumably, in May of 2028. It's going to be that big summer release date. We're not going to actually have a big May summer release date for the MCU, not since 2025 with Thunderbolts, which, unfortunately, although I love Thunderbolts, didn't go as well as I think the MCU wanted it to. But it's going to be, again, just a return to the big kick off the summer kind of MCU movie, which I'm excited for. And then we have Ghost Rider, right? And I think that I want to say that there is a July, there definitely is a July release date. I also wanted to say at one point there was an October release date, which I felt like would have been much more appropriate for a Ghost Rider, but whatever. We're gonna assume that it's either July or October of 2028 rather. So that's the second film. And then a Black Panther Wakanda Forever sequel, so Black Panther 3, is going to be coming out December 2028. So those are 3 confirmed movies, 3 exciting movies, honestly, for 2028. And I want to say that there is room for a third one, or for a fourth one. I do think at one point there was a release date for a fourth MCU movie. Whether or not they scrapped it, whether or not they don't want to do that anymore, it's up to them. So there is that. And then we get the cast. Now, a lot of it, or I guess let's divide it. About half of the cast are people that we had been reporting on. We did segments on a couple weeks ago. And then there's obviously Sadie Sink as Jean Grey. I think another fourth of them are rumored. We're pretty heavily rumored. And then the other fourth, I think, were pretty much complete surprises. So let's just start off with the team. Let's assemble the team, right? We have Kid Connor as Cyclops. So that's obviously something we talked about before. I think it's good casting. I'm excited to see what he can bring to the role. I think it's going to be obviously a very important role as the leader of the X-Men, presumably. Sadie Sink as Jean Grey. We saw her in Spider-Man Brand New Day. She was awesome in it, I think. She was really good. I think there's a lot of room for the character to grow as well, but I think Sadie Sink is an awesome actress. And then the other actress that we talked about before is Samara Weaving, who is going to be playing Emma Frost. So those are ones that we have confirmed. And then I think the biggest surprise to me is that there is a relatively unknown actress, to me at least, to me personally. If you guys know of her, let me know in the comments. I'd love to see what she's been in. But Maya Boyd, what I have looked up, and she is a theater actress, it looks like. So that's exciting. And she is going to be playing Storm. So that's, again, just an pretty unknown actress to me, but I'm excited about that. I think that it's always exciting to have new players in the Marvel Cinematic Universe who can come in as relative unknowns and then really explode onto the scene in a big way, as we will talk about the next actress who's joining the cast. But again, if I'm mistaken and Maya Boyd has been in something incredibly popular, please let me know. I just haven't heard of her before. But she is going to be playing Storm. And speaking of breakout stars, Indy Navarrete, who is the breakout star, I would argue, of this year thus far in Obsession, and she has been talking about how she's been talking with Jake Schreier and how she's been kind of hinting at the role of Rogue. Well, she is now officially cast as Rogue, which I think is exciting. I have personally not seen Obsession yet, just because I dislike watching horror in theaters a lot, but I am looking forward to watching it at some point in the comfort of my own home, where I can lower the volume and the lights, or rather turn on the lights as I feel comfortable. So I'm going to watch her in Obsession, especially now with the casting of her as Rogue in X-Men. But I've heard nothing but great things about her. She is really the breakout star of this year, and I'm excited about that. So those are, I think that's all the X-Men that they announced, except for, or that's all the young X-Men, rather. But they have also confirmed the Professor X of this universe, and it's an actor that I had not really known about before that much. I heard his name a couple times before, but it is Christopher Abbott. Christopher Abbott is going to be our new Professor X. Now, some of the things that he's been in, I personally haven't seen before. He's been in Girls, the TV show. He was apparently in Kraven the Hunter, which, sure, I didn't actually watch Kraven the Hunter. He was in Poor Things, but I don't quite remember what his role was in that movie, which I saw a while ago for the Oscar season. But he was also in Wolfman last year as well. I think, was he the main actor in Wolfman? I could be mistaken about that. But anyways, he was in Wolfman as well. And I think that this is a good choice. I think if they believe that this is a good choice, and if they saw his casting and they were like, yep, this is our Professor X, great. I haven't seen any of his roles to know whether he has the gravitas or he has the sort of groundedness and Professor X-ness of him to play the role. I will say, though, I mean, we'll talk about what we can learn about the cast, but just really quickly talking about their ages. He is 40 years old, so he's not going to be the Patrick Stewart kind of Professor X. He's not going to be the Professor X who's been at it for many decades. He's been sparring with Magneto for a decade and things like that. This is going to be, I think, somewhere in between what we saw of James McAvoy in First Class and what we see of Professor X in X-Men 1, the first X-Men. I think that this is going to be something of a hybrid between those two. And I think that's exciting because he is going to be raising up a new generation of mutants, and I think that will be really fun to see as well. Now, before we get to, again, implications, the other big piece of casting, of course, Adam Driver gets on a video, and he is on set in Pinewood. He's just, they're doing a bit there where he's like, hey, where's everyone else in this Pinewood studio? And he reveals that he is playing Magneto, except he's not. Which I think that he thought, and they probably thought that when they were filming and scripting this, that that kind of joke would have played a lot better. Because I think fans actually, from what I saw from the recordings of D23, got much more excited about the fact that he could be playing Magneto before he said, wait. And then he says Nathaniel Milbury. And I think fans kind of got duped a little bit in that moment because they probably really did believe he was playing Magneto, even though it was a joke. So I don't know if that presentation of that landed as well as they wanted it to. Nevertheless, he's playing Nathaniel Milbury, who is, I think, more commonly, I'd never heard of Nathaniel Milbury as an alter ego. I think more commonly known as Nathaniel Essex, who is, of course, Mr. Sinister. So we have our villain of this X-Men movie in Adam Driver. I think it's fantastic. I think, if Adam Driver didn't want to be Mr. Fantastic, or he didn't want to be Professor X or Magneto or whatever, a character that's going to be in the MCU for a long time, that's totally fine. I think the villain of an X-Men movie, a villain who can be in many X-Men movies in the future, by the way. It's not like it's a one-time role. But if it is a one-time role, that's great, because I think big actors like Adam Driver can come into these roles and make it their own. And I think it's a thing that these villains afford these actors to do. And again, like James Spader coming back for Ultron, he can come back in the future, even if it's a long way in the future. So again, you have your Kate Blanchetts and your Kurt Russells and all these amazing actors who came in for just a movie and then disappeared from the MCU. And I think if Adam Driver wants to do that, he totally can. Now, what can we learn about this cast of the X-Men? Well, I like how it's a mix of actors who have done a lot, who maybe not as mainstream, quote unquote, as others, right? You could have just plucked the entire cast of Stranger Things if you really wanted to, but these are actors who are up and coming, who have promising futures, but haven't really made their stamp. A lot of them really haven't made their stamp, and X-Men could be the role that makes them really jump to the next level, which is exciting. And then you have breakout stars like Sadie Sink and Indy Navarrete, who have played big roles like in Obsession and Stranger Things, and that's also exciting. And then you have Adam Driver, right? So I think it's a really fun mix of actors who are prominent, who are coming into prominence, who are relatively unknowns, and I think that's good. I think that if you got a cast of X-Men that were all big name stars or all relatively unknowns, I think if they were all relatively unknowns, that would be fine. But having this cast anchored by some people who are more proven in the industry, I think that is always a good thing. And the other thing too is that all of these X-Men castings all these characters are going to be presumably in their early 20s, because all these actors are basically in the range of 22 to 25. So what you're setting up here is that this X-Men cast is not a group of kids. It's not like a Stranger Things X-Men cast. They're not in their teens, but they are going to be young adults. And I think that is a really fun avenue to explore when you're dealing with this new generation of X-Men. So I personally am quite excited about this casting. I haven't seen a lot of what these actors have done, so I'm looking forward to, over the next couple of years, seeing a lot of the movies that they have done and getting excited about them. But in the meantime, guys, what do you think about this official X-Men cast? I'm sure we're going to get more. I'm sure we're going to get a Beast in the near future. Maybe a Wolverine, maybe a Magneto. We'll see. But I'm looking forward to this very, very much. Let me know in the comments what you think about this cast. Down. Alrighty, a new trailer for Percy Jackson and the Olympians Season 3 has arrived, and I have some thoughts on it right now. So, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Percy Jackson has been a series of books that I loved when I was growing up. It was a really fun young adult series, coming of age series that just continued to expand, honestly. But the film adaptations, the original ones with Logan Lerman, were not my favorite, to be honest with you, the two films that they did make. And so when they announced they were rebooting the series, I was quite excited. And look, while the first two seasons have not been S tier, they've not been my all-time favorites or anything like that, I've enjoyed them quite a bit. I do think that at certain points, the series, the shows and episodes do feel a little cheap, honestly, which is disappointing. But I do think that overall they do capture the spirit of Percy Jackson really well. And I think that they're able to replicate a lot of the best moments from the books and just the tone, the characters, and I think that that's awesome. But now we're heading into uncharted waters. No pun intended for Percy Jackson Poseidon. We're heading into uncharted waters because nobody has done a big budget live action adaptation of the third book, The Titan's Curse. You had the first two books, and the first two movies were made in adaptation of those, so were the first two seasons. But now we're heading into the very first live-action adaptation of the third book, which is called The Titan's Curse. And what I like about this trailer, and what the actors have said when doing press for this, is that it's going to be darker. And I think it's about time. Because I think the first two seasons were fun, kind of like how the first two Harry Potter movies were kind of more in the childlike wonderment and spirit and amazement. But you get to Prisoner of Azkaban, and things start getting dark with the Dementors. And I think that now is about the time when you start to transition into the darker elements of the Percy Jackson world. Not that Percy Jackson ever was really that dark, to be honest, but I think there are things in the books and in the source material that are leaning towards the darker side of young adult fiction, and I think that is one place to start here. I also think now, hopefully at this point you have bigger budgets, hopefully you have a little bit more bandwidth to do more things and I think from the trailer you get to see, unless they just put all the big budget, big money shots in there, that you are going to be seeing more of Titans, you're going to be seeing more of gods and things like that. Again, not that Percy Jackson needs to have big CGI moments to be successful, but I do think that Percy Jackson, to realize its full potential, needs to rely on things that you just can't do practically, like monsters and gods and Titans and things like that. And I thought that there was a teaser they released a month ago or a couple weeks ago, which was just Percy Jackson holding up the rock or whatever the thing is, and it didn't look particularly great to me. It looked pretty fake, to be honest with you. And so I think that this trailer looks a lot better in terms of those visual effects, right? You get to see a lot more of the gods, I think, and you get to see some more monsters and the giant thing at the end, which I don't even know what that is. And I also do like, the other thing that I really like about this trailer is that it is centering the focus of this season on Percy and Annabeth, because the past season, I would say, was more of a will they, won't they, do they like each other, do they have crushes on each other, do they see each other as friends? If you've read the books, you know what's going on here. But I think now, with the Titan's Curse, that being a little bit more explicit about the nature of their relationship, how they view each other, if they like each other or not, I think is a good thing, because now you're going to start ramping up towards not ramping up towards the finale. This is about the halfway point of the original series, but still, I think that it's wise to then start focusing on Annabeth and Percy's relationship in there as well. You get to see a little bit more of Thalia as well. There are going to be some characters introduced in this season that I think I don't quite know if you get introduced to them in this trailer, but there are, for those of you who have read the books, there are going to be some characters introduced that are going to be pretty instrumental in the future of this Percy Jackson series. So I think that this trailer looks solid. I'm hoping, again, I think that one thing I want from this series is more of a sense of scale, because I think that there is always a balance of Percy Jackson with doing between the real world, between what's actually, the quote-unquote real world and then the quote-unquote demigod Olympian world. And I think that sometimes there is a temptation for this show to go a little bit more smaller scale than I think it needs to. And again, I'm not saying that every single shot needs to be full of CGI visual effects, but I'm saying that I think that I'm hoping for more of a balance here. And I think that this trailer indicates that there will be more of that, but we'll see about that. Guys, what do you think of this new trailer for Percy Jackson and the Olympian Season 3? Let me know in the comments down. Alrighty, guys, Ahsoka Season 2. This show could be interesting, I think. I think that there is a lot of potential for a second season. I think that there's also a lot of intrigue based on the first season. And look, I'm not gonna lie, I was personally pretty disappointed with the first season of Ahsoka. I wasn't a huge fan of it, to be honest with you. But I am excited somewhat for season 2 because I do think that there are things from the first season that they can carry over that would personally excite me a lot. So we'll talk about this first little trailer for Ahsoka Season 2. Now, what I both like about this teaser trailer and what makes me a little bit nervous off the bat immediately is that they are leaning very heavily into Anakin Skywalker. I like it because I liked a lot of what I saw from Hayden Christensen as Anakin Skywalker in the first season of Ahsoka, and hey, look at that. I like a lot of what they're doing with Anakin Skywalker here in Ahsoka Season 2. Looks great. He looks great. This is the version of Anakin Skywalker from Hayden that I always wanted, based on, honestly, again, no hate to Hayden Christensen, but I still dislike the prequels a decent bit, although I do like Revenge of the Sith a good deal more than 1 and 2. But this is truly his redemption as Anakin Skywalker, no pun intended. So I personally am enjoying what I see from this, especially as somebody who thinks the Clone Wars is, again, one of the greatest things that Star Wars has ever done. I just adore Clone Wars. You have no idea. I love Clone Wars. So there is that. But I'm nervous because while episode 5 of season 1 of Ahsoka, if you remember that episode, the Clone Wars episode, the Clone Wars flashback episode, was just instrumental. It was I will forever thank Dave Filoni for that episode because it is just something that I didn't know I needed to see that, right? Seeing Anakin Skywalker like that in the Clone Wars in live action. I loved it. So as an isolated episode, again, I didn't know I needed that, but I did. I loved it. In terms of where it fit in the story, though, I don't really know what it was doing there, to be honest with you. And I'm a little worried that a heavy reliance on Anakin Skywalker here is going to kind of overshadow Ahsoka's story, and it's going to be similar where it's like, do you really need to be here, though? I mean, it's great that you're here, but what is it doing for the story as a whole? So we'll see about that. I think also, again, a good and a bad thing, or a good thing and then a thing that's getting me worried at the same time, is the bigger scale and bigger scope. This season really just looks like a season of Rebels, which is fine, I guess. And again, the good thing about that is that it looks like it's more intense. It looks like there is more of a plan of having a story here. Because honestly, I don't think the first season really had a story, and that was a little bit concerning to me. So it looks like that there is more of a story going on here, which is exciting. On the flip side, I personally was not a huge fan of Rebels, to be honest with you. I know I'm one of few. I know that a lot of people really did love Rebels, but I just personally was never a huge fan of Rebels. And if this is just going to be a season of Rebels, that's fine, I guess. But you see Zeb and you see Ezra and Hera and Sabine and all Chopper, all those characters. But I don't know. I mean, I was never the biggest fan of Rebels, honestly. I do think part of this season from the trailer just still looks a little small scale, to be honest with you. And I think that when you're doing Star Wars, you want it to feel like it's part of the same galaxy, part of the same world that everything else is going on in. So we'll see. I think Thrawn obviously is going to be an intimidating villain, so I think that I have no real concerns there. Although I do think that Thrawn gets beaten very easily in things, and so we'll see what happens with the character here. And then I think that, again, it looks like Ahsoka. Like I'm not enamored by Rosario Dawson's performance as Ahsoka. I think she's fine in the role. And, of course, everyone's made the memes and the jokes about her crossing her arms all the time, which she's still doing. I think that there was even a display at D23 with the costumes character where, guess what? She was folding her arms, so I guess even they know that that's a thing now. But I think that with Ahsoka Season 2, I'm just hoping for a good wrap-up to this story, because I'm personally not the most invested in this story at this point in time. My mind could be totally changed, right, by the time that we get to Ahsoka Season 2. I might come out of the season saying, oh, I would love an Ahsoka Season 3. So we'll see. But at this point in time, I just personally am not clamoring for more. So if I get more Ahsoka Season 2, great. If I get more Ahsoka, that's great. But if I don't, that's also okay at this point. But we are getting more Ahsoka, obviously, and based on what I see from the trailer, I think it looks good, and so I'm hoping for the best here. I'm hoping that whatever we get from Ahsoka is going to be good. Guys, what do you think of this new trailer for Ahsoka Season 2? Let me know in the comments down. Alrighty, we do have one Disney Plus MCU show coming out this year. That is VisionQuest. Quest, and we have our first full official trailer for the show. Now, VisionQuest has always been interesting to me because VisionQuest, it seemed like at the beginning when it was announced that it's another one of these shows that was greenlit because Disney Plus needed more content and et cetera, et cetera. Not to say that the shows that have come out because of that are not as good or lesser. But, the shows like Ironheart or like Echo, for example, it just hasn't felt like those shows have really lived up to the promises that they could have delivered on. But then you have shows like Agatha All Along, for example, and you have this sort of narrative now of this trilogy of shows from WandaVision to Agatha All Along and now to VisionQuest, which I find fascinating because those shows are related to one another, but I think that Agatha All Along was quite different from WandaVision. And I liked Agatha All Along in the end. I think it was a bumpy road, no pun intended, to get there. But you know me, if you've been on the channel, I just love and adore WandaVision. It is one of the best things to me that the MCU has ever done. And so building on that legacy, I don't think is ever a bad thing. Although you can ask some people who didn't like Doctor Strange too, they might disagree. But at any rate, we now have our first look at VisionQuest, which is going to be the follow-up to all of that, where White Vision has left the Hex, and this is Vision in his body with his memories, but not his soul, apparently, and he is going to be asking some really existential questions about humanity and who is he. And I love that, by the way. I love when comic book movies and comic book shows have the ability to ask questions like that, to dig deep into philosophical arguments and think about things like how WandaVision had the chance to dig into grief and the idea of perseverance and love and what all that stuff means. And it was a comic booky show. I mean, it was kind of a weird zany show, but it was a very comic booky show, and yet it was still able to dig into all of that, and I think that is awesome, honestly. So I think that what VisionQuest is able to do here based on this trailer is great. We see what I'm assuming to be manifestations of all the AIs, and I think it's smart because I was wondering, how are you going to pull this off in a way where it doesn't feel weird? Well, it is weird. They are embracing the weird, but it's all, I'm going to assume it's in Vision's head, although I think what Vision's head is still quote-unquote reality, so it's not like he's just making stuff up. I think there legitimately is a version of Ultron that's sitting deep in the whatever neural networks and the chips and all the circuits and things that's in Vision's head. I'm sure that all of it's there. In fact, I would assume probably that part of Ultron is there because, or part of the reason why Ultron is there is because they used the original Vision's body, probably. And so there was always some part of Ultron that was sitting deep in the Vision, and now he's coming back out. And all the AIs probably the same. They're probably all connected to Tony Stark, and so that's why they're all there. So I think that's interesting. I kind of think it's funny how wacky and how much they're leaning into the father-son relationship between Ultron and Vision, which really didn't get explored all too much because we only got about 5 minutes of that in Avengers Age of Ultron. And in fairness, because I was wondering, is it just going to be James Spader in human form? We do get to see a couple shots of Ultron, and I find that interesting because that's, I think Ultron, in hindsight, was probably underutilized, even though he was the villain of his own Avengers movie. But I think that I'm glad that we're getting to see more of Ultron in this show. And then, of course, you explicitly, because I was wondering, are they going to save it like they did with Billy in Agatha All Along, where they reveal that he is the Billy Maximoff from the Hex? And no, they are going to reveal it right away in this trailer that it is Tommy. Or they don't say Tommy, but they say it's your son. So they are explicitly revealing this ahead of the show, that Tommy Maximoff is looking for Vision, looking for his father. So that is the connection between Agatha All Along. That's the connection between WandaVision and all of that. This looks like, honestly, because I think Agatha All Along was a little bit zany, a little bit, not crazy, but just different, in a different way, right? It was taking inspiration from a lot of other things. But I think this VisionQuest to me feels like the most spiritual successor to WandaVision. Not that it's using the same sitcom premise, but it still has that tone of it where it's like we're gonna do something crazy here. We're gonna do a deep character exploration within the realm of a comic book movie, and I think that's fascinating. And I think James Spader and Paul Bettany, when they were on stage for D23, were talking about the fact of what do you do when you have a sort of genocidal maniac in Ultron in your head as your father? How do you grapple with that? And I think it's a weird and interesting premise. And then obviously passing on generational trauma between Ultron to Vision to now Tommy, I would assume, then I think that is something worth exploring. And I'm very curious. I'm also very curious to see, as the final thing I'll say here, of what the balance is going to be between Vision in his head, right? Because I think a lot of the show is going to take place in his head, and Vision in the real world, because that's the White Vision part of it as well. Frankly, also, just not to be too cynical or taking too much of or breaking the fourth wall here, but I think that for budget reasons, you probably are not going to have too much of Ultron and too much of White Vision. I think you're going to rely a lot more on Paul Bettany and James Spader as actors anyways, because they can probably emote more, they can probably be more expressive. So I don't know what the balance is going to be. I would assume that it's probably going to be much more towards the end, where we're going to get a confrontation between White Vision and Ultron, and if Ultron builds a new body and all that kind of stuff. So I'd be very curious to see how that plays out. But I have high expectations. I have high hopes, guys. 2026, by the way, for the MCU, up until VisionQuest, because we don't know, but up until I guess Spider-Man: Brand New Day, has not missed, in my opinion. Wonder Man is probably the project I like the least, and even then, I really liked Wonder Man. So I'm very excited for VisionQuest. I think 2026 has the potential to be one of the strongest years for Marvel in a long time. And I think VisionQuest is going to continue that streak. Guys, what did you think of this first full trailer for VisionQuest? Let me know in the comments down. Alrighty, a new Avengers Doomsday special look. This isn't really a trailer. I suppose it's a trailer, but it's more of a shorter teaser, if you will. So I'm not considering this really a big main trailer, but they released a special look at D23 2026. They released it to the public, and we are here to talk about it in all of its glory. So this trailer, I think, very similarly mirrors what was shown at San Diego Comic-Con. I didn't read all the full descriptions. I didn't read every single leak that came out of that, but I heard that there was a monologue where Vanessa Kirby's Invisible Woman, Sue Storm, was narrating about how Victor used to be a really great person, but then fell because of his losses. And we can see in this trailer now that he is standing in front of that mural, that painting that was the poster, one of the posters for Avengers Doomsday. So it looks like his wife and child were killed somehow, and he blames the Avengers for this. He blames, I'm assuming, primarily Steve Rogers, is based on all the leaks and based on how prominently he's been in the marketing. And I mean, some of the imagery is just gorgeous. The beginning imagery of Doom on his throne with the water and the glass behind him, it really does look like something special. We get a lot of really good looks as well at other characters like Magneto. We get a couple really good looks at Magneto. And I have to say, this version of Magneto, it's not the one that I'm used to from Ian McKellen, but he looks good. He looks like a very grizzled and road-weary Magneto, almost like the version of Charles Xavier that we got in Logan. It looks like this is the version of Magneto. We see Gambit, Shang-Chi, Black Panther. We see a lot of different characters. And then we get that scene where Pedro Pascal's Reed Richards is yelling at Victor. He said, "What did you do?" And I don't know what the context of that conversation is, but I think that it is smart always to play into the relationship between Reed and Victor, because that is always a key cornerstone of their comic book relationship and whatnot. So I think that is a good thing. And I think that that's something that's going to be fun to explore, nevertheless. And then we get a little bit of an extended scene of the Thor versus Doom fight, wherever that is. And I mean, this is such a small teaser, right? So I'm not going to draw huge conclusions from this. I will say, though, there are two lines that Doom says at the end. One I really like, and one I'm a little bit iffy on. So the one I really like is when Thor says something to the effect of, "You're gonna wish you were in hell long before I grant it," or something like that. He says, much more Thor-like. And Doom responds to something to the effect of, "Hell bows to me," or something like that. And I think that's such a cool line. I think that's just fantastic. I think that is the kind of Doom, the imposing Doom that I am scared of, right? The kind of Doom. Also, just to talk about for a second, that Robert Downey Jr., again, is not revealed in this trailer. I don't think he is going to be revealed in the marketing, and I would be shocked, honestly, if he's revealed more than a couple scenes, his faces. But you can see, I mean, I would assume that's Robert Downey Jr., that the acting underneath his eyes, or within his eyes, underneath the mask, his eyes are twitching, his eyes are emoting. It's kind of impressive, honestly, how much emotion you can get out of those eyes. And those couple shots where you can see those eyes, I think it's impressive. So I think that line is really cool. The line at the end where he is raising up the Sentinels and he says, "For I am Doom," didn't really land for me, to be quite honest with you. I don't know, because it's always been a tricky thing with Victor Von Doom, right? Where he is usually not a good guy. He's usually evil, but he usually doesn't start out that way, right? So you would assume his name was originally Victor Von Doom, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm just going to be evil, and now I am Doom," right? It's just sort of always been a weird thing for me. It's been a very comic booky thing that they've had to grapple with when they adapt Victor Von Doom. I think in the Fan Four Stick adaptation, the 2015 version, they changed his name, right? They changed it to Victor Van Dam or something like that. And so I don't know. I mean, I know that I'm sure that there is a last name Von Doom, but I I'm always a little skeptical when villains are like, and I am Doom, or, Thanos. Thanos saying I am inevitable, right, I think is a little bit different, because he's not like, I am Thanos and, whatever. So I don't know. It always makes me a little bit hesitant, because it always feels a little corny to me. Nevertheless, I think that this special look presentation shows more. I think it's more of an extended look, honestly, at the last trailer, which I'm very glad about, because we got that last trailer about a month ago, and I think that having another full-length different trailer come out in a month is probably not a good thing, especially since the movie's still 4 months away, and B, the movie's still 4 months away. And this is a movie where I don't think you want to spoil a lot of it. I think that the marketing team did a great job with Infinity War and a great job with Endgame, and I'm hoping that with Doomsday, there's a lot in here that we don't get to see that will be surprises, will be saved for the movie itself. So what did you guys think of this special look at Avengers Doomsday? Let me know in the comments down. Alrighty guys, Disney's D23 has come and gone. Wow, there was a lot to talk about here. I'm going to recap some of the biggest things to come out of D23. Now, I'm not going to talk about everything, because frankly, I don't know what else I would have to add to the conversation about Camp Rock 3 or Princess Diaries 3 or anything like that. There were a lot of things in here, or The Greatest Showman musical or Kingdom Hearts. There are just things in here that, as much as I like to pride myself on being someone who's pretty in touch with pop culture and movies and television, I can't keep up with everything. And again, there was just a lot in here that I personally couldn't keep up with. So we're going to do kind of a rapid fire recap of a lot of the big things, especially from the big tent poles of Disney, from Pixar, from the live action universe, from Marvel, from Star Wars, from Disney Animation. Now, if there was a trailer released, I'm going to do, or you might have already seen, a separate segment talking about my thoughts on those trailers. So we're going to kind of skim over those here. And of course, we're going to talk about the X-Men cast in a separate segment as well. So without further ado, let's dive right in. I'm going to go in chronological order from what I was taking notes on from the panel. We started out with Pixar, or at least the first big chunk was Pixar, and a lot of release dates in the air right now. So let's go in release order from what they talked about here, because it was not actually the order of events in terms of the movies that they talked about. They kind of went all over the place in terms of the movies that they talked about. But I'm going to go in release order, because 2027, we're going to get Gato. Gato is the film about the cat, and cat kind of being in a gang or mafia sort of situation. I don't even know what's going on there. I think Mark Ruffalo is playing the cat, and I think they got some exclusive footage there, but for now it looks like Gato is the only film releasing from Pixar in 2027. Spring 2028, we're going to get another original film called Ghost Market, which I know almost nothing about, but I think is an interesting premise, and so we'll see what happens there. And then summer 2028, we are going to get Incredibles 3. It's going to be focused more on the kids. There's going to be a superhero league, and I think the focus is going to be on also Bob, aka Mr. Incredible, feeling a little bit washed, feeling like the times are passing him by, and that's going to be a part of the show, or part of the movie rather. So summer 2028, Incredibles 3. And then in 2029, we have Coco 2. It takes place a few years after the events of Coco. We got a little bit of concept art as well, but again, that's 3 years away, so we won't probably get a lot of that about that for a while now. So that was Pixar. Then moving on to live action, Lilo and Stitch 2 coming in May 2028. I think the character, there was a villain or another version of Stitch that was announced to be a part of the movie. I'm not super caught up on Lilo and Stitch lore, so a lot of people seem to recognize this character. I did not, but Lilo and Stitch 2, I love the first one. I know a lot of people didn't. It made $1 billion though, so of course you're going to make a sequel. Lilo and Stitch 2, May 2028. And Tangled, we got an on-set video from the stars of Tangled, and Catherine Hahn came on stage as well. March 2028 rather is going to be the live action Tangled, so that's going to be fun. I think I haven't seen Tangled in a long time, but I think that the music, I still listen to the music sometimes. It holds up as well, so I'm excited to see this, but we'll see what happens there. Now with Marvel, we're going to skim over this part pretty quickly, because again, I did separate segments on Marvel, talking about the VisionQuest trailer, talking about the Doomsday special look, and talking about the X-Men cast. The one thing I did want to highlight though, that is not highlighted in those separate segments, in addition to, of course, that they were talking about Avengers Endgame Encore and stuff like that, but they've been promoting that for a long time now. But interestingly, again, right, we talked about at Comic-Con, how Ryan Reynolds crashed Comic-Con and then just kind of left during the Doomsday panel. And once again, Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds, they post a video, or they show a video of Hugh Jackman basically reading a script from Ryan Reynolds to the audience, or to Kevin Feige, saying, hey, if you want us in Avengers Doomsday, let us know. And it seems like the conclusion of that video was nothing at this point in time. So it's interesting because it's really looking like they're trying to imply that these two characters are going to be in Avengers Doomsday, which I think we all figured anyways. But I don't know why we're not confirming it at this point if you're just going to keep doing these teaser kind of things. Because either, in my opinion at least, do them or don't do them at all. Announce them or don't announce them at all. So I'm a little confused about what the strategy is here, because at this point we all know that they're going to be in the movie. So I don't quite know what the strategy is there, but I digress. Star Wars, we got our first trailer for Ahsoka Season 2. We talked about that separately. And then Star Wars Starfighter, they did a little bit of a panel there. I was thinking we were going to get a first trailer, but it looks like they're going to save it for later, which is totally fine. That movie is 9 months away, not 7 months away. So it's still a long ways away. And then finishing up with Disney animation, we got Zootopia 3 confirmed. That's exciting. And then we got some promotion for Hexed, which is coming out later this year. And then a new movie coming out, I believe, next year or 2028 called Clay, which is what if a Disney mentor was actually a terrible mentor. That's interesting, but the person, or the I think it's an animal or creature who's mentoring the mentee, I guess, he's mentoring a ball of clay, like literally a ball of clay. So I don't know. This is going to be like Disney does Clayface, I guess. Probably not, but I have no idea what this movie is going to be. But Clay, that's another movie that's coming out. And then, of course, Frozen 3, they got Idina Menzel and Kristen Bell to come out and sing a song that they've already, I guess, composed and done. So Frozen 3, definitely on the way. I think the release date is next year, I want to say, next December. I could be wrong about that, but they got them out there to sing a new song from Frozen 3. And those were, honestly, I think all the big announcements from D23. There was a lot. You can go check out some other articles that really compile the big announcements and all the little ones as well, and just everything in great detail. I personally, if you want to know why we're not in-depth discussing all the footage and stuff like that, is because my personal philosophy is that I don't love reading footage descriptions, honestly. I try just to watch the official trailers for things, and of course you get a special look here or there with Avengers Doomsday, for example, or Endgame did something like that. So I try to watch those if I can. But for footage descriptions, I'm like, we're going to see it at some point, either in the actual movie itself or in a trailer, so I'm not super pressed, and I don't really want to get those things ruined for me, if I'm being honest. So that's why we're not reading every single bit of footage description that we got from D23. But guys, those were some of the big announcements from D23 2026. What were some of your favorite things that we got announced? Let me know in the comments down below. Guys, that will do it for episode number 146 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you so much for joining us on yet another episode. Lanterns was... that first episode was amazing. I'm so impressed with what happened, even with the ending, which has garnered some controversy. So we'll see where that goes from there. And then D23, of course, with Avengers and VisionQuest and Ahsoka and PERCY JACKSON, X-Men, all of that amazing stuff. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on yet another episode. If you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. Give this video a like if you could, and let me know in the comments what you think about any of the topics. And then, of course, the audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast, we are available there as well. And make sure to subscribe to the main Access Blockbusters YouTube channel as well. That will do it for episode number 146. I am Access Blockbusters, and I will see you guys in the next one.